Alrighty. Well, here we are for another episode of the Schaefer Files. Today we are going to do part two of Surveillance Gone Wrong. Remember, if you like what you see, please hit the like button and also subscribe. If you have any questions, you can comment. We'll be happy to cover those as they come in. And you can always send us an email at dave@preferredintelligence.com. So, stories of surveillance gone wrong, part two. As we covered last time, we can have some very interesting investigations and very interesting surveillance occurrences, but not everything goes as planned. One particular surveillance that comes to mind is a domestic that we did a few years back, and we spent the better part of a day and a half on a particular subject. Now, first portion of it was to follow the subject. Nothing really happened for the first few hours after he was scheduled to be off of work. Followed him straight home, no issues, problem solved. Well, not problem solved, but basically tucked him in, so to speak. He went straight home, and there was no activity for the remainder of the minimum period, so we broke off. The next day, we set up outside of his parents' house. And the reason for that was we wanted to see him pick up his child and then follow him wherever he took the child to document where he was going with the child and what he was doing, who he was bringing the child around. The other parent in the case, our client, was scheduled to drop the child off at the subject's parents' house. So we set up early enough, far enough down the street that nobody has a clue we're there. We call into the police, standard procedure, let them know we're going to be there, type of vehicle, so that if the police do get called about us or about a suspicious vehicle that matches ours, they don't, hopefully anyway, don't come out and investigate us, because they already know that we're there and why we're there and have verified that we're properly licensed. So we set up early enough, and client comes over, drops off the child. We document the child going into the grandparents' home. Everything's fine. Then we spend 8 hours outside watching absolutely nothing. We report to the client, and the client says, "Oh, he showed up an hour ago and dropped the child off at my house. What's going on here? We've been here 8 hours and nothing's happened. We didn't see him pick up the child." Well, come to find out, client dropped the child off, grandparents brought the child inside the house, and this particular house had a driveway in the back of the house where the alley is. Grandchild, or the child rather, walked into the house, greeted the grandparents, and the grandparents promptly walked him through the house, out the back door, and into the father's waiting vehicle, and took off. There was no way for us to know, no way for us to catch, and because we weren't allowed to have two investigators, no way to even remotely anticipate this without running the risk of covering the back of the house and not seeing the front when the child was picked up. Surveillance gone wrong. Another instance of surveillance gone wrong would be an insurance investigation that was done, or file that was covered a few years back. Set up outside the claimant's house, and everything's going normal. Same routine as the previous example. Called the police, set everything up. What the investigator did not know, and I was not the investigator on this one, but what the investigator did not know was that our particular claimant had made friends with all of his neighbors, all the way down the street. And in fact, he was quite popular. So while we were far enough away that the investigator had no chance of being burned by the claimant, when the neighbor who loved him to death noticed the vehicle there and knew that the claimant had been injured recently or allegedly injured recently, spotted the surveillance vehicle, he turned around and called the claimant. Now, good news is we've got photos, or video rather, of the claimant walking normal with a fluid, unaltered gait and no medical devices, etc., etc., etc. But the investigator was burned because the claimant marched right outside of the house, walked straight down the street, and began taking photos of the surveillance vehicle. Another instance of surveillance gone wrong. We're on a claimant, and the claimant makes it through a light that the investigator does not. Now, there are certain procedures and methods for getting through a red light safely without breaking the law and without putting yourself at risk to catch up with a claimant that makes it through a light. All these procedures are done, but unfortunately too much time has passed and the claimant is in the wind. Do your standard canvass, turn around, go back to the claimant's house if you're close enough, and wait. Problem. About 15 minutes after the investigator arrived back at the claimant's home or in the general vicinity of the claimant's home, he receives a surprising knock on the side window. It's the claimant yelling and screaming about being followed. Now, there can be any number of reasons as to why or how the claimant was burned on this one, and we won't get into this particular one, but nonetheless, surveillance gone wrong. And finally, we have another insurance claims investigation for surveillance gone wrong. This one is a situation where the claimant was a very unsafe and erratic driver. He drove at high rates of speed. He ran red lights. He took unsafe turns. And on this particular instance, I was the investigator. Now, being a seasoned investigator, I know plenty of tricks that your average new investigator wouldn't know or wouldn't be able to perform properly. But that still did not help. Why did that not help? Well, it's simple. I'm willing to drive at a high rate of speed. I'm willing to run a yellow light and risk it turning red in the middle. I'm willing to take certain maneuvers at intersections to quickly bypass a light and get back on the road. But I draw the line at playing chicken with a freight train. And you heard me correct. At one point, the claimant was in such a hurry to get to wherever he was going that he blew through or over a set of train tracks that did not have guardrails. And the only way for me to continue to follow would be to run the risk of not being over the tracks by the time a train came through. And I do mean a large freight train. Think locomotive and the whole 9 yards. At that point, I called the client laughing, explained everything. The client breaks out laughing over the phone and says, "Don't worry about it. I understand. Just ask me one or answer one question for me. Do you think you're burned?" And I said, "No, I don't think I'm burned. The claimant has been driving like this since the moment he walked out of his house and took off from his home, and there was no way that I was burned right out of the gate unless he's friends with every single solitary neighbor," which is possible, but still highly doubtful, although I have had it happen once. Client said, "Okay, I understand. Do what you normally do and report back in an hour." Did my normal thing, found the claimant, was on him the rest of the day, so I was able to save the file. But in that instance, just before I called the client, surveillance had gone wrong. Hope you enjoyed this video. And again, please remember to hit like if you did. If you liked some of the other videos, subscribe to the page. We're also on Rumble. And of course, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to us directly. If you have an investigation we need to cover, or you'd like a little bit of information or a consultation, feel free to give us a call or email us at 214-785-4504 or dave@preferredintelligence.com. Thank you.